Hello and welcome.
Fractals, what are you doing here?
I'm helping with the season 1 finale, like we talked about.
Oh, I kind of meant like research a topic.
Oh, I just thought I would be welcoming everyone to the stream, but I guess I can talk about a topic. Yellowstone, as you can see, is just any type of rock or stone with something yellow on it. So that includes this here rock with a yellow bandana, or this
All
stone.
right, where's that mute button? Yeah, that's not quite right, Fractals.
Oh, not quite right?
Yeah, maybe just kick off our
Yeah,
finale.
sure. I can just welcome everyone to the chat. With that, hello and welcome to the Thank You for Being My Co Pilot Season 1 finale. For anyone new to the stream, I am the moderator. That is Jules Altus. And each week, we pick a new national park to explore together. And this week, we are visiting Yellowstone National Park for our Season 1 finale. As you may know, the best parts of the stream are the moderator and all of you, so feel free to post any questions, comments, or anything like that in the chat as we fly along. A small disclaimer, yes, Jules is a pilot in real life, but we will be taking full advantage of the simulator, so please don't try any of this in real life. He's also researched the park in preparation for tonight's flight, as well as picked a couple of topics and helped improve park-related Wikipedia pages. Using Wikipedia, it really just makes sure that the facts that we have here are cited and checked by others, as well as it gives back to a living body of knowledge that really goes well beyond our hour here tonight. So to that end, if you notice anything missing or that should be clarified, please help improve those Wikipedia pages. As Jules and the Wikipedia community often say, be bold and make the updates. So without further ado, I'm Fractals, and I will be your steward for tonight's flight. Please make sure that all bags are stowed under the seat in front of you or in the uphead compartments. All electronics are in airplane mode, and all tray tables are in the upright position. Temperature in Yellowstone is currently a balmy 66 degrees, so sit back, relax, and let's explore Yellowstone National Park.
That's pretty good.
I know. But let's be honest, what I'm really here for is those bad jokes. So, hey Jules, how do you tell if there's a pilot at a party?
I don't know.
They'll tell you. Yep. Continuing with those bad jokes, gotta love it. For anyone who's new to the stream, each week we pick a national park to explore together. We tell a bunch of bad jokes and learn a bunch of new things. It's a lot of fun, so make sure that you follow Jules on Twitter. Stick around and join our Discord community, or simply just follow Jules here on Twitch, and you'll get those notifications. And come back and spend season 2 with us.
Thanks, Fractals. That was a good overview. And I think that means all that's left is to start our departure. Let me flip over here. Hello, I see a handful of planes on the runway. Let me get myself rolling. Hopefully you like that little bit. Fractals and I want to do something fun and different for the season finale. Also, thanks for growing that mustache out just for this occasion, Fractals. And the Gantt chart shirt, of course. All good choices. So Fractals already posted up the flight plan, if you have that. If you don't have the flight plan, you can also follow along on the other link, which is just to the flight tracker that I use. Same thing that you see on the iPad, basically. And we're taking off here at about 5:30 a.m. So it's a pretty early flight in Yellowstone, and I have few clouds on, which I found to be kind of the nicest combination visually, just to fly around. And the sun kind of rises as we go over these things, but feel free to play with the timings and do what you like. Today we're flying a Beechcraft Baron G58, so this is a twin engine plane. It's a fun little plane and one of my favorites, at least, to go flying. Let me see. I'm going to set up the nav mode here in just a second, but right after the runway there's actually this point of interest called Roosevelt Arch that we're just passing under. So let me pull up a picture of that. And I'll pull up a picture. I'll tell you what, remember where that was and I'll pull up a picture in just a second here. So I'm going to set up my autopilot settings. And I typically do this on while I'm live in case folks want to use the same settings. Not like an endorsement for these settings per se, just this is what works for me, so this is what I use. So I'm hitting nav mode, I'm hitting vertical speed, And I'm selecting my altitude to be a final altitude of 9,000. And then my vertical speed, I'll climb at about 1,000 feet a minute. So we climb it pretty quick here. Let's engage autopilot. See how we're doing. Thanks, Fractals, for posting up that poll. So the first question here is, have you ever been to this national park? I have been long ago, probably more than 10 years ago, and it's still one of my favorite parks, so highly, highly recommend. Now we're flying over just at this moment, or actually just off to our left there. That's called Mammoth Hot Springs. So let me pull up a photo of Roosevelt Arch. So this is one entrance to the park. And then Mammoth Hot Springs looks something like this. I'll play actually 2 different videos today, and you'll see Mammoth Hot Springs come up in both of them because it's a pretty cool little spot. It looks like... Oops, let me go this one. Looks like Yes, Once Upon a Time is in the lead here, so that's the same category I'm in. Small admin updates today. So I'm using 2 different add-ons that I'd highly recommend. The first is Bush Talk Radio's Points of Interest pack. So you'll see as we fly around some of the areas labeled that we're not actually flying to. That's the Bush Talk Radio Points of Interest. And then the other one is Windhover's Yellowstone Airport add-on, which is very pretty. We probably won't get a chance to actually see the airport at the end of the stream, just timing-wise. But I do recommend for folks with the game to install it because it's a very fun way to check out that actual, like what the airport kind of looks like. All right. Well, let's dive into Yellowstone. So the purpose of Yellowstone National Park, and you may remember there's this thing called a foundation document that I like to pull up because I think it's one of the best overviews of why the park exists. And so let me grab this and I'll load it so you can read it at the same time. So Yellowstone National Park, the world's first national park, was set aside as a public pleasuring ground to serve the geothermal wonders and preserve and protect the scenery, cultural heritage, wildlife, and geologic and ecological systems and processes in their natural condition for the benefit and enjoyment of present and future generations. A little bit of a broad statement for a park purpose, but the big piece in here is those geological wonders and then also the ecosystems in the area. And I'll talk about that a little bit. There's actually a great overview video for Yellowstone. I'm going to jump ahead just a couple of minutes here so you can see the ground slightly better. There you go. There's actually a really good overview video of Yellowstone. And so I'm going to pull that one up real quick. We'll skip the middle section of the video. It goes into the different seasons in Yellowstone and some of the wildlife. It's really interesting, but it's a little bit too long for the stream. Yellowstone also is one of those national parks that has a lot of really good videos online. And so if you're curious to learn more about the park in general or any particular topics, they have a wealth of knowledge just waiting there.
The park is just a howling wilderness of 3,000 square miles, full of all imaginable freaks of a fiery nature. Now I know what it is to sit enthroned amid the clouds of sunset. Rudyard Kipling, 1907.
Welcome to Yellowstone. The human stories of Yellowstone reach back 11,000 years and include your journey today. What drew you to Yellowstone?
In 1871, rumors of volcanic activity prompted scientists to explore and document the Yellowstone area. Artist Thomas Moran and photographer William Henry Jackson accompanied the expedition. and through their paintings and photographs, Yellowstone captured the hearts and imaginations of the American people. A year later, Yellowstone became the world's first national park. Land set aside as a place for all to experience nature's wildness. Discover your Yellowstone. From dazzling palettes of color created by microscopic communities of heat-loving organisms called thermophiles, to the joy of new life, to water crashing down into the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone River, to so much more. Are you ready to experience your Yellowstone?
If you're interested in hydrothermal features, this is one of the best spots in the world to view them.
Gaze into the park's numerous hot springs, pools where water heated underground flows freely to the surface. Watch geysers, hot springs with an underground constriction, erupt hot water above the surface. More than 500 geysers, over half the world's total, are found within the park, most of them near Old Faithful. Listen to fumaroles, the hottest hydrothermal features, hiss and growl as heat flashes the limited water underground into steam. Look for bubbling mud pots, acidic hot springs that dissolve the surrounding rock. Tour these hydrothermal wonders along the park's many boardwalks.
Yellowstone is a volcanically active area. Much of the park is actually situated inside of the Yellowstone caldera. The caldera was formed about 640,000 years ago during a massive volcanic eruption. Today that caldera is about 30 by 45 miles wide.
I'm going to quickly point out on the map, so you can actually see the caldera is sort of this purple vignette, I guess, and you can see when we're flying over it.
All this volcanic and hydrothermal activity is due to Yellowstone sitting atop a geologic hotspot, a place where molten rock, known as magma, reaches closer to the surface than normal. As you explore Yellowstone, think about the tremendous heat beneath your feet. Stay on boardwalks and marked trails in all hydrothermal areas.
To experience Yellowstone is to experience the heart of one of the largest and most intact temperate ecosystems on Earth, known as the Greater Yellowstone Ecosystem.
The ecosystem contains vast lodgepole and Douglas fir forests, sagebrush steppe and alpine tundra, wetlands, rivers, and lakes.
All right, so we'll watch the last part of this video as well, but let me pull up a couple quick places we passed. So here's Steamboat Geyser. It's just a little bit ways back in the geyser basin that we passed. That was the sort of gray area that we flew over. And there's this big eruption of Steamboat. And then Hayden Valley is a particularly good place to go and see megafauna, so like bison or elk or those sorts of things. And we're actually flying over Hayden Valley right now. Let me do this. So I'm going to bring my daylight forward just a little bit more, so you can sort of see. So all this area off behind us is sort of open meadows. You might remember talking about meadows in a past stream, but this is one of the places that animals like to hang out. All right, back to the video.
or are here time and again. There is a lot to enjoy. With the greater Yellowstone ecosystem extending over many millions of acres, encompassing state, federal, tribal, and private lands, it is a living laboratory filled with knowledge waiting to be discovered. Find out how the changing climate affects the ecosystem, or how native populations are impacted by invasive species. Learn how fire plays a natural role in the ecosystem, and how research on microbes living in extreme conditions has led to medical and scientific discoveries. Explore Yellowstone's visitor centers, join in a ranger program, and most of all, get out into the park to witness the wonders firsthand. Take time to get to know Yellowstone.
People have traveled from around the world to experience Yellowstone. They have enriched the history and chosen to preserve and protect this world-renowned treasure.
Some of my most memorable experiences in geyser basins have been at sunrise or sunset. So it's very quiet, and the light will sometimes strike a geyser pool just right, making it a beautiful color.
Just seeing the reaction of visitors when they see a grizzly bear for the first time, or a majestic bull elk. And it's just a remarkable thing to watch.
I got to see Old Faithful, the Grand Geyser, and some other ones. My favorite was Old Faithful.
There are no other places like this on the face of the earth.
There are so many stories to learn from Yellowstone. It's your park, and so we want you to enjoy it while you're here.
Welcome to Yellowstone.
Visiting Yellowstone is said to be life-changing. A place to be preserved for and enjoyed by all. Once you experience Yellowstone, where will it lead you?
Got a little bit of canyon flying in there while we were watching the video. So we just passed Upper and Lower Yosemite Falls. Let me pull up pictures of those real quick. Hopefully avoid running into that. All right. I'm just catching up on the chat. Yeah, Fractals. The Bears had a problem like that for a long time. And Flying Singer, it's too bad about the bush talk, but it just goes off the whole time, I suppose, yeah. Alright, so here's Upper Yosemite Falls, which we passed first. And then Lower Yosemite Falls. And then that brief section where it was really kind of this bright yellow color, that's where the name Yellowstone comes from, or they think. And this is that canyon we just flew through. A couple of bits in there. Alright, I'm going to start climbing back up here. Let's see if this will just work for me. Alright, so hopefully that was a nice little intro to Yellowstone. Like I said, there's a lot more to cover, so check out the National Park website or the Wikipedia page if you want to learn more. Close call on the cliff. Yeah, that's right, Fractals. A little more exciting for the last live stream of the season. Oh yeah, I think they do, Nublato's Trace, I think they do actually have animal sounds in the game. Because I've heard birds on takeoff sometimes. And I wouldn't be surprised if they had, like in some of those meadows, some different effects. Or I don't know if you're referring to the video, also could be where those sounds are coming from. But yeah, I've noticed that in some other parks. Especially Olympic National Park had a lot of those. Alright. So, I'll let Fractals throw up this first poll, and while that's going, one quick one that we're coming up to. So this is Tower Fall. And Tower Fall is a big and beautiful waterfall just a little ways down the Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone, which is what we're flying over right now. It doesn't show up great in the game. You'll probably be able to tell where the waterfall is. Also, there's the markers in the game, which help a lot. But it is pretty to see, and it's right next to the road. And with that, let's dive into our first topic. And we'll do Person of the Week at the end. So our first topic today is geysers. What is superheating is the poll. Is it liquid heated above its boiling point without boiling, often under pressure? Is it matter heated by a superhero, usually with a form of night vision, or excuse me, a form of heat vision? Or is it whenever Fractals enters the club? Give folks a second. The obvious answer, of course, being always the Fractals answer. So a little connection to the park. Yellowstone National Park is home to approximately 300 to 500 geysers, which is more geysers than the rest of the world combined. It is also home to the world's tallest active geyser, which was Steamboat Geyser. We passed it just a little bit ago. Is Steamboat Geyser. We passed it a minute ago. But there's Tower Falls. So you can see how the road hugs right along the canyon there. So what is a geyser? A geyser is a spring characterized by an intermittent discharge of water ejected turbulently and accompanied by steam. As a fairly rare phenomena, the formation of the formation of geysers is due to particular hydroecological conditions that exist in only a few places on Earth. So they're really prevalent in Yellowstone, but they're pretty uncommon in general. We'll talk about why that is in a second. So where do geysers form? They require a specific combination of 3 geologic conditions, and those conditions are found near volcanic terrain. So that would be sort of the reason why you might find it at like a caldera like Yellowstone. Those 3 conditions are intense heat, water, and plumbing system. Plumbing system we'll get to, don't worry. So intense heat in Yellowstone comes from the magma that's relatively close to the surface. Talked about that in the video. Water is readily available in the area, and the plumbing system is the most interesting part in my opinion. The plumbing system has to be made of fractures, fissures, porous spaces, and sometimes it'll have like cavities where like a chamber of water can actually build up. So consider the difference between a hot springs and a geyser. In non-eruptive hot springs, geothermally heated water rises back up to the surface through porous and fractured rocks. So if there's fractures in the rock, it'll just slowly rise, then you have a hot springs. In geysers, the water instead is explosively forced upwards by high pressure created when the water boils below. Why would it boil below versus just start bubbling up to the surface if it's highly porous and fractured rocks, right? We'll talk about that. So let me quick close on the poll here. So it looks like we have a tie for the 2 best answers. So the correct answer is superheating is liquid heated above its boiling point without boiling, often under pressure. The letter C on here, whenever Fractals enters the club, is also an acceptable answer, though. That would also pass. All right, so how do geysers work? This is a really useful GIF overview, but there's a lot of things going on all at once, so I'll play it a couple of times while I talk, and then by the end it should all kind of make sense what's happening. So first, we talked about superheating, so that's super important to this. As the geyser fills, the water at the top of the column leading to the surface cools off. So this will fill up, you'll see this water here, and then this water here is cold. I don't know if you can see my mouse here. I'll do that. Yeah, that's all cold when it first fills. But because of the narrowness of the channel, convective cooling of the water of the reservoir is impossible. So it's too narrow a channel, and so it can't actually cool or heat all the way up and down, and so it just stays cold on top, relatively cold on top. The cooler water above presses down on the water beneath, kind of like a lid on a pressure cooker, allowing the water in the reservoir to become superheated. So remember, superheated liquid often occurs under pressure. So this cooler water is putting a lid basically on this while the water gets heated. It then becomes superheated beyond the point of boiling until it finally reaches a temperature where the water in the geyser actually does begin to boil. As soon as that happens, bubbles start to rise to the surface. And as soon as the pressure of that pressure cooker lid is released, well, the water is heated well beyond its boiling point, and so it flash changes into steam. And so that's why you get these explosive eruptions, is as soon as the pressure breaks even just a little bit, everything inside of the geyser turns to steam in an instant. I did all that from memory because I love geysers. But I'm checking my notes to make sure I didn't miss anything. Yeah, that also is why you get kind of a froth of exploding both steam and hot water, is because it's super cooled, and so it's actually, or super heated, excuse me, and so it's coming out as steam and then pulling some of the water with it. Eventually the water remaining in the geyser cools back down to below boiling, and then it starts to build up in the reservoir, cools off in the channel again, and the process starts over. So that's how geysers work. Okay, but if you're paying attention, I also mentioned that the rock has to be very porous and fractured, right? And so if it's porous, fractured rock, why would there build pressure in this column? Why not just have the water release elsewhere into the rock? So that's one of the key things that happens at Yellowstone and other places with geysers. There's this material called geyserite that's often found nearby a geyser, and it looks like this. And geyserite is mostly silicon dioxide and is dissolved from rocks and gets deposited on the walls of the geyser's plumbing system. So that's why they call it the plumbing system, and on the surface. So if you look at the top of a geyser, you'll actually see this rim of geyserite. So you can imagine that that's solidified there, but it's also solidified all the way down that column and into the reservoir. And so that allows it to hold pressure in a way that means I can actually build and have an explosion like that. If it didn't have that geyserite, then it would just be a hot springs. Or it could just be a hot springs. That's also why it's allowed, or why it's able to become superheated, so that it allows it to hold pressure in a meaningful way. As far as types of geysers, there's really two main ones that you'd encounter. So fountain geysers erupt from pools of water and are typically in a series of intense, even violent bursts. This would be a fountain geyser. And then cone geysers erupt from cones or mounds of geyserite, or similar materials. And they usually in steady jets that last anywhere from a few seconds to several minutes. So Old Faithful is an example of a cone geyser and has a cone of geyserite around it. There are also two types that are explicitly not geysers, and so I'll mention those real quick. There's artificial geysers, and these is from things that have been drilled and fitted with impermeable casements, so it causes them to erupt like geysers. This one's from California. It's called Old Faithful of California in Calistoga, and essentially it was someone who dug into what used to be a geyser and then kind of reactivated the geyser, but you could also just create your own if you knew where the magma was, where the source of heat was. There's also something called a perpetual spouter, and this is more like a natural hot spring that just shoots up water constantly. Because it's not intermittent, it's not considered a geyser. In this example, actually, this was a geyser for a number of years and then became a perpetual spouter for about 6 years, and then went back to being a geyser just as things underground changed. All right, and then as far as to where you can find them, so I mentioned they're not super common. You can find them kind of scattered around the world, though. The largest site, like I talked about, is in Yellowstone, and then the second largest site, the largest concentration of geysers, is in Valley of Geysers in Russia. So that's actually up in this corner here. So if you want to learn about another place, I was thinking that might be a cool place to go check out in the flight sim, actually. But actually, this is one you can only get to in a plane, it sounds like. It's kind of an interesting place as well. One interesting thing and kind of important thing about these geysers is they don't last forever. And so they can end either naturally or they can end because of human intervention. There's a useful example of this one. There were two large geyser fields in Nevada, but those geyser fields were destroyed by the installation of nearby geothermal power plants. At the plants, geothermal drilling reduced the available heat and lowered the water table to the point that the geyser activity could no longer be sustained. Take it how you will. It's important to remember, though, with a place like Yellowstone, the reason it's still around for us to enjoy is because we've taken the time to protect it, to make sure that that kind of thing doesn't happen. That's why they talk a lot about the greater Yellowstone ecosystems, too, is because that protection is something that's hard to get back after you lose it. Also, Yellowstone was the first national park. I don't know if I've mentioned that yet, but that's a useful thing to know as well. All right, so in summary, a geyser is a spring characterized by intermittent discharge of water ejected turbulently and accompanied by steam. They are fairly rare, as the required conditions exist in only a few places on Earth. The critical element of geyser is the superheated water underneath a pressure cooker-like cork formed from a column of water above. Under pressure, the water can heat beyond a boiling point, and so when the pressure starts to release, that all gets flashed into steam and then ejects out. This process requires good airtight plumbing, which is often made possible by geyserite. And so that covers geysers. I did want to make a quick safety announcement on them, though, since we're dealing with very hot liquids and hot steams here. So remember, what do you call the guy who falls into the Yellowstone hot spring? Oh, sorry, what do you call a guy who falls into Yellowstone hot spring? Stu. We won't reminisce on that one, or won't linger on that one too long, but it is worth keeping in mind. Okay, Fractals, you want to pull up the next poll here, and we can dive into our second topic. Thank you. So our second topic today is something called extremophiles. We'll talk more about what those are, but what counts as an extreme environment like an organism? Is it anything can count as long as you shout extreme across your arms like that? Or is it the Altus household during spring cleaning? Or anywhere that is challenging for carbon-based life to form? We'll give folks a second on that one. And while we do that, let me pull up, just off in the distance here, you can't see it because of the clouds, but I did want to show the Grand Tetons National Park is just a little ways over. And on a clear sky day, you can actually see the Grand Tetons in the background here. So let me rotate slightly. You can see it just over my nose. So there's the Grand Tetons. And so from a high vantage point in, oops, it's blocked by the pole. Hold on, there you go. Like just over my nose, kind of off in the distance there. And so if you go to the park, or when you go to the park, it'll look something like this. So you can look for those off in the distance. This is technically a view from Craig's Pass, which is a little bit further north, but you get the gist. The other thing, we're flying over Yellowstone Lake now, so here's a picture of what Yellowstone Lake looks like. I'll zoom out so you can actually see things. And the geysers are on the shore of the lake in some places. There's also a geyser we'll pass over in just a moment called the Fishing Cone. And this is a picture of the Fishing Cone by Ansel Adams, as well as people actually fishing in the fishing cone. Or not fishing in the cone, but the story is that folks were fishing in Yellowstone Lake, and they realized that one day a fish kind of got off the hook, but landed in this fishing cone. And they watched the fish swim around frantically and then boil itself to death, basically. And so the fishermen started realizing that if they caught the fish, they could walk over to the fishing cone, dunk the fish in for a little bit, boil the dinner, and then they could eat it right from there. So it became a practice to go and do this sort of thing. A fun discovery for someone in 1881 or something, 1870s. All right, so it looks like our poll here has the correct answer as the top vote, which is anywhere it is challenging for carbon-based life to survive. So that is, at least in this context, what we'll define an extreme environment as. The Altus household during spring cleaning also does count, though. It's a good second place one. So extremophiles. The connection to the park is that Yellowstone has a large number of what's called thermophiles. Those are a subset of extremophiles. A thermophile is an organism that thrives at relatively high temperatures, between 41 and 122 degrees Celsius. That's about 106 to 252 degrees Fahrenheit, so beyond boiling. They also give us the colors of the Grand Prismatic Spring. So we'll fly over this in just a moment. You can see it really well in the game. But those colors come from these thermophiles, from that it's a subset of an extremophile. So then what is an extremophile? An extremophile comes from the Latin word extremus, meaning extreme, and then philia, meaning love, is an organism with an optimal growth in environmental conditions considered extreme and challenging for carbon-based life forms to survive. There's actually a very good video from the park that talks about thermophiles, and so I'm going to let them take it away because their overview and graphics are really, really nice for explaining these concepts. They won't talk about extremophiles in general, but again, it applies to most of the same context. So let me pull this one up real quick. So I'll pop out of the plane. That fishing cone is right at that west thumb marker. So we'll pass over that shore there.
Welcome to Yellowstone, land of geysers, hot springs, dazzling colors, wolves, bears, and bison. You probably came to Yellowstone to enjoy these places and animals. What you may not know, however, is that there are actually millions of organisms that are helping put on this show. They are called thermophiles. Yes, that is them. They are everywhere in the park. What exactly is a thermophile?
A thermophile is a heat-loving organism, and typically we're talking about quite high temperatures, more than 100 degrees Fahrenheit.
And we're not talking about an organism that can simply tolerate high temperature. That wouldn't be considered a thermophile. We're talking about an organism that has its optimum growth temperature at a high temperature.
To give you a point of reference, we could be considered mesophiles. We have an optimum temperature from 20 to 35 degrees Celsius, and we can even tolerate up to 40 degrees. Thermophiles prefer it a bit hotter, from 40 to 80 degrees, and Yellowstone is even home to hyperthermophiles that live in temperatures above 80 degrees. The thermophiles of Yellowstone come from all three domains of life: archaea, bacteria, and eukarya. Archaea are single-celled organisms, and they can often be found in the hottest areas of thermal features, with temperatures in the neighborhood of 100 degrees Celsius. Bacteria, which are also single-celled organisms, prefer environments with slightly lower temperatures, around 85 degrees. Eukarya, which can be multicellular, include algae, fungi, plants, animals, and even us. Thermophilic eukaryotes live in even cooler areas and aren't found at temperatures much past 60 degrees. One thing you might be wondering is why thermophiles can survive such high temperatures when we can't.
Thermophiles, their cells are really amazing. They can survive at high temperatures because their genes and their proteins are different than ours. Human cells, our proteins would denature at high temperatures.
Which means that as temperature rises, our proteins fall apart. On the other hand, the proteins inside the cells of thermophiles stay rock solid and are unaffected by the heat. Yellowstone is home to countless species of thermophiles, but they don't all live in the same areas of the park. As it turns out, water temperature and chemistry are the two most important factors in determining where thermophiles live.
Probably the most important is temperature. Some organisms prefer 80 to 90, some prefer 70 to 80. So we can find a distribution of different thermophiles just based on temperature. Of course, chemistry plays a secondary but extremely important role in the distribution of different thermophiles. For example, if you have a high iron system, we might have organisms that are oxidizing iron. If we have high sulfide, we might be oxidizing sulfur for the energy. And therefore the chemistry combined with the temperature all of a sudden starts to control the distribution of what organisms are present.
Besides temperature, the water's pH is another important parameter that affects where different species of thermophiles occur. So what exactly is pH?
pH is a measure of the acidity of water. So,
all right, so we're going to flip back to the video in just a second. But I didn't want to miss Yellowstone as we're flying over here, so let me pull this up. Okay, so there's the Yellowstone, I can't remember what the upper geyser basin, which contains Old Faithful. You can see all the buildings and the boardwalks around Old Faithful. There's a bunch of other geysers that follow that river. So you can kind of see... It's not... Yeah, it's cooler on the ground, I would say, but it's really neat to see, I think, from a plane. You can see some of the thermophiles, the different colors there, actually right in the rocks. That's the other thing I want to make sure we show. Let me pull up real quick. So there's some more pools off on the side there. Here is Old Faithful, which we saw a couple of times. Just a reminder. So this is definitely a must-see. And then the Grand Prismatic Spring we'll be flying over in just a second. So it looks like that. And up close is that sort of thing. And the other one is the Great Fountain Geyser. We'll pass in just a moment. So this sort of looks like this. All right, and what I'm going to do for people following along, I'm actually going to go from the Grand Prismatic String and fly back up to Steamboat Geyser because we have a little bit extra time. And then I'll come back to the Caldera Rim. So we get to see those again. I'm sort of stalling so you can see the Grand Prismatic Spring in full screen. Well, I'll tell you what, I'll keep going about extremophiles while we fly over this one. So one thing they talk about is, are extremophiles really extreme, or is it just that humans are kind of wimps? And Nublado's trace, I also feel very validated by that, so it's a funny observation. So from a... here, there you go, there's the Grand Prismatic Spring, as well as some other springs in the area. Particularly cool one. I did try to land a amphibious plane in there, and it is a little too small, but you're welcome to give it a go if you want. And then the Grand Fountain Geyser as well. So let me detach my autopilot here, and we'll just continue on this heading. Actually, you know what I'm going to do? Okay, we'll do something like that. That should work. Okay, let me flip back to the thermophile video. So they're just about to jump into pH, which is another type of extremophile. Would be an extremophile that is likes different levels of pH.
Perfect distilled water is neutral. It's a 7 on the pH scale, whereas moving to higher levels of pH, you get more basic. Things like drain cleaner are about a 14 on the pH scale, so very basic, whereas things like battery acid are very, very acidic, would be about a 1 on the pH scale. We have features in Yellowstone that are 1 or below, very, very acidic features. We also have some that are quite basic, and we have thermophiles that live in all of these environments. As you travel around Yellowstone, you will encounter several different thermal areas, and they're all unique. Places like Mammoth Hot Springs, where we are now, have a very unique bedrock, a limestone underneath us. So the mineral that comes up to the surface is called calcium carbonate, and it forms a rock called travertine. The water itself here is neutral water that is not boiling, it's not too hot. Whereas other areas like Norris Geyser Basin, we would call acid sulfate areas, where the water itself is very hot, but also the water and the gas coming from underground carry hydrogen sulfide, and this ultimately becomes sulfuric acid. So the springs may be very acidic, and you have different microbes that will thrive there. And then you have other areas, like the Upper Geyser Basin, for example, we would call neutral chloride, where the water, it's more neutral, maybe even a little bit basic. It can be quite hot, though, so different microbes will thrive in those environments.
As you're out exploring all these different environments, you'll see many different species of thermophiles. But how can you tell them apart? Along with water temperature and chemistry, it just so happens that all those beautiful colors you see are important clues.
Color of thermal systems in Yellowstone is a wonderful diagnostic tool. If you look at Grand Prismatic and start from the middle of the pool, you can tell there's no organisms there because it's only the blue color of the water. And a lot of that blue color in the water comes from dissolved silica. And dissolved silica is very high in hot water systems. Then as you work cooler, you get to a band of yellow color that by definition we know that it's probably no hotter than 75 centigrade right at that point, because that's where photosynthesis can start. And the organisms then that live in the yellow band are a little different than the organisms that live in the orange band, and they're expressing different pigments to capture light energy. And so you can have a lot of different species of thermophiles living right next to each other in these beautiful banded patterns based on their optimum temperature range.
In fact, one runoff channel, such as this one at Mammoth's Mound Spring, can have hundreds of different species of thermophiles.
What's incredible is you can't see each living cell, but when they live all together like that, they create these beautiful and very unique mats all around the thermal features. Thermophiles are the smallest building block of this ecosystem. Starting with the archaea and bacteria, you'll then have bigger and bigger organisms that will start to eat those cells. So you'll have some eukaryotes, which are protozoa, which will sort of swim around eating archaea, eating bacteria. And from there you'll have some ephedrid flies. You might have spiders be a predator of the insects. And then even birds will come in, like killdeer will start to come in to eat the insects.
While thermophiles are stunning, unique, and fascinating to see in Yellowstone's thermal areas, they are also a subject of intense scientific research, and they hold a lot of potential.
All right, we'll stop that one there. They talk a little bit about thermophiles and how, excuse me, some of the discoveries led to the ability to use PCR, which is a polymerase chain reaction, I believe. That's how you can amplify DNA. And so if you have like a sample of DNA from a crime scene, you can use this particular process that depended on a discovery from a thermophile. It's pretty cool if you want to learn more about it, but let's dive into the more general case of extremophiles. So we're playing with my autopilot here, see if we can fly over. So as we pass Steamboat this time, look on the ground and you'll see a lot of those artifacts of extremophiles, of the thermophiles that live there. But I probably gotta go. Yeah. Alright, hold on. I'll fix my heading here. East? I thought you said west. Okay. I don't know if that's a well-known joke or not, but we used to say that all the time we got lost navigating. So I was mentioning that the video talks about how humans are sort of in this mesophilic range, meaning that they kind of prefer those more moderate temperatures. And so from an anthropocentric view, extremophiles are weird because they aren't like us. But that starts from the assumption that our world is sort of the central world view, right? And so that's, not going so far as to say like try and walk a mile in an extremophile's shoes, right? Like that's maybe a bit far, but just saying that they are one of the most abundant life forms and have continued to thrive in extreme conditions for a long, long time. So perhaps calling ourselves mesophiles is more appropriate than calling them different because they prefer an extreme environment. Be different for their extreme lifestyles, I guess. Anyway, okay, so what other types are there? First, many of them are what's called polyextremophiles, and essentially means that they qualify as an extremophile under one or multiple conditions, more than one category. So there's a couple, so you have like lovers of heat, like in Yellowstone, or an ocean floor vents would be a good example of this sort of thing. I'll face down so you can see as we pass over Steamboat again. There's also lovers of low temperatures, like this lichen. Now you might remember we talked about lichens when we went to Mount Rainier, so if you're curious to learn more about lichens, that's a great episode to check out. But this one thrives in what photosynthesizes at negative 24 degrees Celsius. It's pretty incredible. There's actually a chart that I really liked from Oregon State University. So this is Creative Commons, and I'll just pull this up real quick because you can see. So here's the mesophiles, thermophiles, and hyperthermophiles, and kind of their ranges. These are also lovers of high pH, like I talked about. You might get this in a soda lake, for instance, Mono Lake, which is just east of Yosemite. So if you do the Yosemite flight plan, we actually take off from the airport. You can see in the background of this picture. So this is a high pH lake, as an example. And then there's lovers of low pH is another one. You can also have extremophiles that are completely within a rock, such as this one from Antarctica. So this is a life form that grew within a rock. I believe it was several miles under the ground, or several thousand meters for sure. There are also ones that like radiation, high pressure, high salt content, tons of different variations like that. And then there's those that like many different extremes, such as the tardigrade. This is sometimes called a water bear. For those of you who already know tardigrades, I often find people get very excited when you start talking about tardigrades. So yes, I did manage to work a tardigrade in here. Tardigrades are among the most resilient animals known, with individual species able to survive extreme conditions, such as exposure to extreme temperatures, extreme pressure, both high and low, air deprivation, radiation, dehydration, starvation. It will kill most other life forms that we know. So this is what a tardigrade looks like. And then here's another picture just to kind of the adorableness factor. I don't know if they're cute, but they're always talked about like they're cute, so it's a good reputation, I guess. And tardigrades have also been able to survive in outer space. Alright, I'm going to flip back on my nav mode here and see if this takes me where I want to go. Great, thank you. Like Singer, yeah, the tardigrades make excellent astronauts. There are live tardigrades on the moon? Fractals, what does that mean? Like live, like... Yeah, what does that mean, I guess? Speaking of space, so astrobiologists are particularly interested in studying extremophiles, as it allows them to map what is known about the limits of life on Earth to potential extraterrestrial environments. This is particularly relevant for Mars. So remember that that picture of a rock with extremophiles in it, so it looked like this. Well, deserts in Antarctica are exposed to harmful UV radiation, low temperature, high salt concentration, and low mineral concentration. And those conditions are very similar to what exist on Mars. Therefore, finding viable microbes in the subsurface of Antarctica suggests that maybe there are viable microbes that are living under the Martian surface. Research indicates it's unlikely that Martian microbes exist at the surface or even shallow depths, but they could be in subsurface depths of about 100 meters. So in summary, an extremophile is an organism with optimal growth in environmental conditions considered extreme and challenging for carbon-based life. There are many such environments, including acid-basic, hot-cold, high pressure, low pressure, or completely within something like a rock. Scientists are particularly keen to learn more because of their ability to survive in these extreme environments, and they give us hints to what life beyond Earth could look like. I really like this topic actually because it touches on matters of perspective, right? So from the perspective of me, who likes my nice, 75 degrees and sunny sort of temperatures, I read about extremophiles and it's like, oh, that's not for me. But from their perspective, right, things are different. And sometimes the best thing to know, or best thing to do when you don't understand someone else's actions is to just take a walk in their shoes, right? Try and see things from their perspective. Let me illustrate with a story. So a man arrives at the top of a mountain, and the guru who lives there greets him. I can answer any question you have. The man replies, "Where are my sunglasses? It's really bright up here." The guru replies, "On top of your head." The man finds his sunglasses and says, "Thank you for sharing your perspective. I just couldn't see." As the man turns to leave, the guru stops him. "Wait, that's it? You came all the way up here to ask that question?" The man says, "Yes, thank you." Well, the guru says, "What's going on? I haven't had another visitor in like 15 years. And the man says, "Oh, I take it you don't know about Wikipedia." Okay, I'm glad I could end on a Wikipedia joke for season 1. So we'll briefly touch on Person of the Week this week, which is... Yeah, well... okay, let me read the tardigrade thing. Oh, yeah. Yeah, fractals. And there's also extremophiles that when they sent the mission to Mars, they realized later that there were extremophiles that could survive their clean rooms when they were building the robot. And they're like, oops, hope we didn't accidentally introduce life on Mars. That's a big part of the Martian mission, so to not do that. All right, so our person of the week this week is park rangers. It's more of a group. So here's a picture of a park ranger ceremony. So why park rangers for this park? Henry Yunt was hired in 1880 to enforce the prohibition on hunting in Yosemite National Park. In addition to these duties, he would act as a guide and escort for visiting officials, such as he did in 1880 for the Secretary of the Interior. Horace Albright, the second director of the National Park Service, called Yount the father of Ranger Service, as well as the first National Park Ranger. So the first National Park Ranger was stationed in Yellowstone. So National Park Rangers are among the uniformed employees charged with protecting and preserving areas set aside in the National Park System by the U.S. Congress and President of the United States. The term Park Ranger is traditionally used to describe all National Park Service employees who wear the uniform. Broadly speaking, all National Park Service Rangers promote stewardship of the resources in their care, either voluntary stewardship via resource interpretation or compliance with statute and regulation through law enforcement. These comprise the two main disciplines of the ranger profession in the national parks, so law enforcement or stewardship, or resource interpretation, excuse me. The first director of the National Park Service reflected on the early park rangers in the U.S. national parks as follows. They are a fine, earnest, intelligent, and public-spirited body of men, these rangers. Though small in number, their influence is large. Many and large are their duties heaped upon their shoulders. If a trail is to be blazed, it is send a ranger. If an animal is floundering in the snow, a ranger is sent to pull him out. If a bear is in the hotel, if a fire threatens a forest, if someone is to be saved, it's send a ranger. If a dude wants to know a why, if a sagebrusher is puzzled about a road, it's ask the ranger. Everything the ranger knows he will tell you, except about himself. Park manager is the authorized title for the general park manager. So if you hear park manager, that person directs personnel, controls, and guides the use of funds, materials, and facilities needed to carry out the complex park programs and performs important public relations activities for the park or the park area. All right, and with 3 minutes left to go here, Fractals, you want to pull up our last poll? And I know I've flown well beyond our destination here, so I'll circle back in a moment. So, poll question is, what national park are you exploring next? While folks vote on that one, I, for one, will be all of the above, but, we'll see which ones show up. Today we talked about a couple of topics. We talked about Yellowstone National Park, talked about geysers and extremophiles, and then we talked about the park rangers as our person of the week. Fractals at the end will post links to Discord community, Twitter, Twitch, especially with this being the season 1 finale. If you want to get notifications about the next season, follow on Discord. You can check out Twitch. I don't know how to do notifications on Twitch, so probably Twitter or Discord are the best places for that. Thank you, Fractals. And let me see if there's anything else. I want to give a quick special shout out to a couple particular co-pilots. So Flying Singer, who's been flying along for, I believe, like 4 months to every single flight. So great that you can make it for our season 1 finale as well. Fractals, of course, the world's greatest moderator, and my very supportive wife. So thank you, wife. And of course, all of you, my favorite co-pilots. Like I said, I'll post information about season 2 in the coming months on Twitter and Discord. Hope to see you all then, or better yet, hope to see you next week if you're able to join for our more casual fly-ins. So we'll do a little less topics, more just fly around, chat, and Discord sort of situation. I'll also stream to Twitch just my plane flying around, not any conversation. If you'd like to watch, just because you enjoy the scenery. So that's something I would enjoy. Looks like the results of our poll are in. So the next national park people are exploring is a park I learned about in the stream. And the runner-up being the next one I get the chance to. I love it. I think that's it. Thank you all very much. I will hopefully see you next week in Discord. We can have more casual chats, but if not, I will see you for season 2. So until then.